What kind of family leaves a 6-year-old alone in a dark house at night? How did my niece end up calling me, whispering that she was hungry and scared? And why did my parents, people who taught me about responsibility, treat me like I was the problem when I arrived? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Daniel Pierce, and the night everything snapped into focus for me started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. It was late. Past 10:30, I was sitting on my couch in my small apartment, half asleep, drifting in and out, while some rerun murmured in the background. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. Or at least, that's what I thought until I saw the tiny digits under it. Lily, my 6-year-old niece, calling from my parents' landline. I sat up fast. Lily had never called me from their house before. At that hour, she should have been asleep, tucked in, lights out, maybe dreaming about those glittery animal stickers she liked so much. I answered quickly. Her voice was tiny, whispering. "Uncle Daniel, I'm scared. I'm hungry. Can you come?" For a second, I honestly thought I misheard. I asked her to repeat it. She said the same thing again, only softer, like someone might hear her. My heart kicked hard in my chest. I grabbed my keys and my jacket without thinking. I didn't ask questions. I didn't have the luxury. I just told her I was coming and that she should stay on the phone with me until I got there. She whispered the whole time, told me the house was dark, told me she couldn't find Grandma or Grandpa, told me she'd been alone. A long time. I kept my voice calm, steady, reassuring. Inside, though, something cold was forming, something tight. It took me 11 minutes to get across town. I barely remember the drive, just the sensation of my hands gripping the steering wheel. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, the house was completely dark except for the faint glow of the hallway nightlight. Their car wasn't there, neither was my sister's. The porch light was off, the curtains were closed. Lily was waiting at the front door when I got out of my car. The moment she saw me, she ran toward me and wrapped both her arms around my leg. "Don't leave," she said. "I'm not going anywhere," I told her. I carried her inside. The living room smelled stale, like no one had been there for hours. I checked the kitchen, dark, checked the backyard, empty. The back door wasn't even locked. I moved through the house room by room, and the cold feeling in my chest got heavier with each quiet, empty space. Lily held onto my hand like she was afraid I might disappear too. I made her a peanut butter sandwich and poured a glass of milk. She ate so quickly I had to tell her to slow down. She kept glancing toward the front door, waiting for footsteps that never came. No note, no text, no explanation. Her little voice came again, barely above a breath. I tried calling Mom first, but she didn't answer. "Did you call Grandma and Grandpa?" I called the house phone and no one picked up. Then I called you. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. Inside, I was boiling. My parents had volunteered, no, insisted, on watching Lily that night because my sister Marissa had a late shift. They had argued that it was what grandparents are for. My mother even made a big point of telling everyone how helpful they were. Helpful, right. Almost 40 minutes passed before I heard a car in the driveway. Headlights swept across the living room window. Lily stiffened, but I told her she was safe with me. The front door opened and my parents stepped in, both of them still dressed from dinner. My mom's lipstick was smudged. My dad smelled faintly of beer. They froze when they saw me standing in the living room with Lily's empty plate on the table. My mother's eyebrows shot up, her voice sharp, defensive. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" "Lily called me," I said. "She said she was alone." My dad let out a tired sigh like I was the inconvenience. We were gone for just a little while. "She said she was alone for a long time," I replied quietly. My mother scoffed. "She exaggerates. You know how kids are." But Lily was behind me now, half hidden, eyes wide. Her tiny fingers gripped my sleeve. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The house was dark. The doors were unlocked. My father shrugged. "It was only dinner. We didn't expect you to make a big scene." I looked at them, really looked. Their clothes, the slightly glazed look in my mother's eyes, the way my father leaned too much on the doorframe. They weren't coming back from a quick dinner. They'd been out long enough for a child to get scared enough to call me, and instead of apologizing, they were defending themselves. My mother frowned at Lily. "Sweetheart, why would you call your uncle like that? You made him worry for nothing." Lily shrank behind me even more. That was the moment, right there, when something in me shifted. Not anger, not shock. Something quieter, clearer, like someone had cleaned a fogged-up window. My parents weren't sorry. They weren't even concerned. They were annoyed they'd been caught. I asked them calmly, "Why didn't you text Marissa? Or me? Or anyone?" My dad waved his hand dismissively. "We didn't see the harm. She was fine." "She wasn't fine," I said. "She called me shaking and crying." My mother continued like she hadn't heard me. "Well, at least you're here. You can take her home now since you're already making this such a big deal." They acted like they were doing me a favor. I took a slow breath. "Marissa needs to know," I said quietly. My mother's face hardened. "Absolutely not. She's stressed enough. No need to drag her into things that aren't real problems." "Not real problems. A 6-year-old left alone at night was not a real problem." I felt Lily's small hand slip into mine. She whispered, "Can I go home with you?" My mother frowned. "Daniel, don't encourage her. She needs structure. She stays here tonight." "No," I said simply. "She's coming with me." My parents stared like I had slapped them. My dad straightened, face going red. "Daniel, don't be dramatic." But I wasn't being dramatic. I was being factual and completely calm. "I'll take her to Marissa's," I said. "She needs to know what happened." My father muttered something under his breath. My mother crossed her arms and said, "You always did have a flair for making yourself the hero." I ignored that. I picked up Lily's small backpack from near the couch and placed it over her shoulders. She looked relieved, leaning against my leg as we walked to the door. As I stepped outside, something in my peripheral vision made me pause. My mother's phone lit up on the entryway table. A text preview glowed bright on the lock screen. I didn't read it fully, but I saw enough. The words, "Been gone way longer than we said," and a laughing emoji. Someone responding to a message she had sent earlier. A message that contradicted everything they'd just told me. My father noticed where I glanced. He lunged forward quickly and flipped the phone over, screen down. "Nothing you need to look at." I didn't react. I didn't raise my voice. I simply nodded once and walked out. I buckled Lily into her booster seat. Before I could close the door, she tugged at my hand. "Uncle Daniel," she whispered, "please don't leave me here again." My throat tightened. "I won't," I told her. "I promise." I closed the door gently, walked around to the driver's seat, and sat for a long moment with the engine running and the weight of her words pressing into me. Then, as I backed out of the driveway, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Marissa. And the first line made my stomach drop. "Mom says you caused a scene. What's going on?" That was the moment I knew. This wasn't going to be simple, and my parents weren't going to back down. But they had no idea that this time, this situation, I wasn't going to back down either. The next morning, I woke up on my couch with my neck stiff and my phone on my chest. I had dropped Lily off at Marissa's place the night before. I didn't say much. I had carried her up the stairs half asleep. Marissa had opened the door in an oversized t-shirt, hair tied up, eyes tired, and asked what happened. I told her that Lily had called me from Mom and Dad's house because she had been alone and scared. I kept it simple. No extra words. Marissa frowned and said Mom had already called, said I had overreacted and made everyone uncomfortable. She said they had only stepped out for a moment and that I always took things too far. She said maybe I was still sensitive from being on my own so much. I just watched her face as she said it, watched how quickly she chose their version of events over her daughter's fear. I remembered that look from childhood. Growing up, I was the easy child. That's what my mother liked to call me. I did my homework without being asked, kept my room clean, graduated on time. Marissa was the baby, the one everyone rushed to protect. When she forgot things, my parents laughed and said she was just scattered. When I forgot things, they reminded me that I was the older one and should know better. Back then, it hadn't bothered me much. I thought that was just family. You play your role and keep going. But sitting there on my couch, replaying Lily's shaking voice, that old pattern didn't feel harmless anymore. It felt dangerous. At work that day, the garage smelled like oil and metal and coffee. I liked that smell. It was simple. When a car came in broken, the problem was usually something you could see or hear or test. People brought you something broken and trusted you to fix it. Clear expectations. I was tightening the bolts on a brake caliper when my coworker Javier walked by. He paused and looked at me longer than usual. He asked if I was okay. He said I looked like I hadn't slept. I told him my niece had a rough night at my parents' place. I didn't give details, just said I was worried. He shook his head and said he knew what it was like when family didn't listen. He said sometimes the people who talk the most about being good grandparents are the ones who do it for image, not for the kids. The word image stuck with me. That was my parents' favorite thing. They loved telling people how involved they were. At church, Mom would brag about watching Lily so Marissa could work. She would tell anyone who listened that she didn't know how young parents did it without supportive grandparents. People would nod and say she was amazing. They never saw the other side. They didn't see the way my mother snapped when Lily spilled juice on her expensive rug. They didn't see my father's impatience when Lily asked one too many questions. They didn't see how often they forgot small details and then blamed someone else for not reminding them. On my lunch break, I sat in my car and closed my eyes. I thought about all the times I'd stepped in quietly. The time Marissa had called because her sitter canceled last minute and she had a night shift. I had left work early, picked up Lily from school, and stayed with her until morning. When my parents talked about that night later, they said they had helped Marissa by keeping an eye on things. I wasn't even mentioned. The time Lily got the flu and Marissa was exhausted, falling asleep sitting up. My parents visited for 20 minutes, brought some store-bought soup, took a couple of photos for social media, then left. I stayed and cleaned the bathroom, changed bedding, and sat on the bathroom floor with Lily while she cried and said her stomach hurt. Later, Mom posted online about how hard it was to see your granddaughter sick and how grateful she was to be there for her. My name never appeared in any of those stories. It never bothered me much before. I wasn't doing it for credit, but now I started to see something I hadn't seen clearly before. They liked being seen as good grandparents. They didn't like doing the quiet, invisible work that made you actually good. That afternoon, I picked Lily up from school because Marissa had texted me asking if I could help again. She said she had to cover someone's shift. She didn't mention the previous night at all, just sent a quick message like nothing big had happened. I said yes. I always said yes. The parking lot was crowded with cars and parents trying not to block each other in. Kids streamed out of the building in small groups, waving backpacks and papers. Lily walked out holding her teacher's hand. When she saw me, her eyes lit up. She let go of the teacher and ran the last few steps. I picked her up and felt her small arms wrap around my neck. It was a simple thing, but it hit me how much trust was in that grip. Her teacher walked up to me with a tight expression. She asked, a little too loudly, whether Lily had eaten lunch last week on Thursday. She said there had been a second time in 1 month when Lily's lunch was missing and no money was in the lunch account. She said Lily had been too embarrassed to say anything at first. She said Lily had told the cafeteria worker that Grandma said it was fine. A few other parents turned their heads. I felt their eyes on me. In that moment, it didn't matter that it wasn't my fault. It didn't matter that I wasn't the one responsible for packing her lunch that day. I was the adult standing there. I was the one being looked at like I had failed. I explained that I wasn't the primary caregiver, that Lily stayed mostly with her mother and sometimes with her grandparents. I said I would make sure it didn't happen again. The teacher nodded and told me she hoped the adults around Lily would coordinate better. Her tone wasn't mean. It was professional, but it still stung. I buckled Lily into the back seat and told her that if she ever didn't have lunch, she should tell an adult right away. She nodded and said she didn't want Grandma to get mad. She said Grandma had told her she was too old to be needy. Needy. A 6-year-old asking for food. I drove in silence for a few blocks. Then Lily asked if Grandma and Grandpa were mad at me. I asked what she meant. She said she had heard Grandma on the phone that morning saying I liked to make a big mess out of nothing. I realized something then. My parents' version of last night had already taken shape. In their story, they weren't careless. They were victims of my drama. Back at my apartment, I made Lily a snack and turned on her favorite cartoon while she waited for Marissa. She sat on the rug, leaning against the couch, more relaxed here than I'd seen her at my parents' place. I sat at the table, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to call my parents right away, to demand an apology, to make them admit what they had done. But another part of me already knew how that would go. They would say they had only gone out for a short time. They would say I was overreacting. They would remind me of every favor they had ever done for me. They would turn it into a story about ungrateful children. That night, Marissa came by after her shift to pick up Lily. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, hair flattened from a long day. She thanked me for helping. I told her I was happy to do it. Then I tried again. I told her calmly what had happened the night before, how Lily had called me from a dark house, how no one had been home, how scared she had been. I watched her face closely. At first, she looked worried. Then her expression changed as she processed what Mom must have told her. She said Mom had already explained. She said they had only gone out quickly and that they had neighbors around. She said it wasn't like Lily was alone in a forest. She said I made it sound worse than it was. I told her that 6-year-olds don't know how long an hour is. They just know the house was dark and empty. She rubbed her forehead and said I was adding stress to her life. She said she needed support, not more problems. She said if I kept attacking Mom and Dad, they might not want to help with babysitting anymore. She said then she really would be stuck. I realized something in that moment. Marissa needed them, not just for Lily, but for herself, for the cheap childcare, for the emotional safety of still being the baby in their eyes. She couldn't admit they had done something wrong without threatening her own position, so it was easier to treat me like the one making trouble. After they left, my apartment felt too quiet. I stood in the kitchen staring at the dishes in the sink. My parents' voices from years ago echoed in my head. They used to tell me I was too serious, that I should let things go, that I always made little problems bigger with my overthinking. Maybe that had been true sometimes, but this wasn't a little problem. Later that evening, I sat at my small dining table with a pad of paper and a pen. Old habits. I wasn't making a plan yet, not really. I just wrote down what had happened. Time Lily called, time I arrived, what I found, what my parents said, what Lily said. The words looked simple on the page. No feelings, just facts. My phone buzzed. A notification from the family group chat. I opened it. Mom had sent a long message. She said there had been a misunderstanding. She said she and Dad had only been out briefly and that they had trusted the neighborhood to be safe. She said Lily had overreacted and that I had made everyone uncomfortable by accusing them. She said I needed to stop acting like I was the only responsible adult in the family. Then more messages followed. An aunt chimed in to say Mom and Dad had always been great grandparents. An uncle commented that kids these days were too soft. Someone else joked that I was still the same intense Daniel from high school. I watched the small dots appear and disappear as people kept typing. My chest felt heavy, but not surprised. Then Marissa added her message. She said everyone should calm down. She said I was just stressed and took things too far. She said we should let it go and remember that family is all we have. I stared at the screen, at the long block of messages, at the way the story was already being shaped without me. As I watched, another bubble appeared at the bottom. A new message was about to be sent. And my own name was in the preview. The new message came from my cousin Erica. She wrote that she did not understand why I was attacking our parents when they had done so much for everyone. She added that some people in the family never appreciated what they had until it was gone. My name was right there in the middle of it, tied to the word ungrateful in a way that did not surprise me. I put the phone face down on the table. The words were all familiar. Different day, same script. The part that bothered me now was not the name calling. It was what they were willing to ignore to keep that script alive. 2 days later, Mom invited me over for dinner. She did not phrase it like an invitation. She said in the family chat that it would be good if I stopped by that weekend and that we could clear the air like adults. Marissa added a thumbs up emoji underneath. I did not answer right away. I read the message 3 times and felt that same cold clarity settle in again. In the past, I would have made an excuse or gone over and tried to keep peace or told myself it was easier to let things go. This time, I simply replied that I would be there. On Saturday, I drove to my parents' house as the sun went down. The neighborhood looked the same as always, small houses with trimmed lawns, porch lights starting to flicker on. Mrs. Hadley was watering a plant on her porch. She lifted a hand when she saw my car and gave me a small, tight nod. There was something in her expression that I noticed and filed away, but I kept going. Inside the house, the table was set, the good plates out. Mom liked to do that when she wanted to send a message about family unity. There was a roast in the middle, steamed vegetables, a bowl of mashed potatoes. It looked like a picture from a holiday brochure. Marissa and Lily were already there. Lily sat at the far end of the table, feet not touching the floor, coloring quietly with a small set of markers. My parents were in their usual spots, my father at the head of the table, my mother near the kitchen so she could jump up and manage everything. Mom greeted me with a carefully bright smile. She said it was good I had decided to come and that we could finally talk like reasonable people. Dad added that he hoped there would be no drama this time. We said grace. Lily whispered the last part under her breath, eyes closed tight. When we started eating, the conversation stayed on safe topics for a while. Work, the weather, some neighbor who had sold their house for a ridiculous price. It was almost normal, and for a moment I could almost believe that maybe this would be one of those evenings where everyone pretended nothing had happened. Then my mother changed the tone. She put down her fork and said she wanted to address what she called the incident. She said she had not slept well since, knowing how unfairly I had judged them. She said she had always done her best for this family and that being painted as careless grandparents had hurt her deeply. My father nodded along. He said they had stepped out for a short dinner at a restaurant only 10 minutes away. He said they had left the living room lamp on. He said they had been gone less than an hour. He said I should know the difference between real danger and my imagination. I listened. I did not interrupt. I watched Lily, who stopped coloring and stared down at her paper. My mother said that Lily had a vivid imagination and that children could be dramatic. She added that if Lily had called me, it was probably because she was overtired and wanted attention. She said it was not kind of me to encourage that behavior. I asked calmly if they remembered what time they had left the house. My father said he did not recall the exact minute, but it had been early evening. My mother said she knew it was before 7 because the restaurant gave them the early special. She laughed lightly as she said it, like she was sharing a charming detail. Then I asked if they remembered telling anyone they had been gone longer than planned. My mother frowned and asked what I meant. I told her I had seen her phone light up when I left that night. I said I had seen a message that mentioned being away longer than expected. Her eyes shifted just slightly. For a second, there was a crack in the performance. Then she smiled and said I must have misread it in my rush. She said the message was private and did not concern me. My father leaned back in his chair and said that the real issue was my attitude. He said I acted like I was the only one who cared about Lily's safety. He said I had never raised a child, so I had no right to lecture them. He said I did not understand children. That sentence landed differently. It was not just an insult. It was an attempt to disqualify me from the conversation completely, to turn me into a non-parent in a discussion about a child so they could ignore anything I said. I looked at Lily. She was staring at her plate now. I told them that a 6-year-old alone in a dark house was not about understanding children. It was about basic supervision. I said that locked doors and informed adults were not negotiable. My mother sighed loudly and said I was making everyone uncomfortable again. She said Marissa needed help, not conflict. She turned to my sister and asked if she agreed that this whole thing had been blown out of proportion. Marissa shifted in her chair. She said she wished we could put it behind us. She said she needed Mom and Dad's help with babysitting. She said it made her anxious when we fought. She did not look at me when she said it. It was at that moment that I felt the quiet shift inside me. Not a surge of anger, not an urge to shout, just a click, like a switch sliding into a new position. I realized that they were not going to admit anything, not now, maybe not ever. Their version of reality was more important to them than the truth, more important than Lily's fear, more important than my concern. They wanted things to go back to normal. I did not. I did not say anything else for a while. I let them continue their conversation. They moved on to complaining about prices at the grocery store, about neighbors, about politics. The air around the table got lighter, as if they believed the matter was closed. Lily barely touched her food. She asked quietly if she could be excused. My mother told her she should at least finish the carrots. Lily forced a few bites and got up, taking her paper and markers into the living room. I watched her go, the small slump in her shoulders telling me more than any words. When dinner was over, Marissa gathered dishes, and my mother insisted on doing the rest. My father turned on the news like he always did. I walked outside to get some air. The evening air was cool, the street was quiet, porch lights glowed in a line. As I stepped off the front porch, I noticed someone watching from next door. Mrs. Hadley stood by her mailbox, a small stack of letters in her hand. She hesitated, then walked over to the low fence between our yards. She said she hoped she was not intruding. I told her she was not. She said she had heard raised voices a few nights ago. She said she had seen my car in the driveway late at night, which was unusual. She mentioned that she had noticed my parents were not home at that time. I nodded and said there had been some confusion about Lily. Mrs. Hadley looked down at the letters, then back up at me. She said she did not want to cause trouble, but she had been worried for a while. She said she had seen Lily outside alone more than once. She said there had been a day when Lily stood on the sidewalk for 15 minutes, calling for Grandma and tapping on the front window. She said nobody answered. My jaw clenched. I asked when that had been. She told me it had happened twice that she could recall. She described the days, vague but clear enough. Both were days when my parents had told the family how much they were helping. Mrs. Hadley said she had thought about calling someone but had convinced herself that maybe there was a misunderstanding. She said she had gone over once and walked Lily back inside. She said she had found the front door unlocked and the house quiet. She said she did not see any adults around, but she had not wanted to pry. She looked guilty as she told me this. I told her calmly that I was glad she told me now. I meant it. She hesitated again. She said there was one more thing. She said she had Ring camera footage that showed the times Lily had been outside alone. She said she had kept it just in case something happened. She said she could show me if I wanted. I felt that cold clarity crystallize into something sharper. I said I would appreciate that. My voice stayed even. She said we could set a time, that she did not want to drop it on me without warning. She said she would gather the clips for me. Then she paused and added that there might be audio as well. She said Lily had said some things that made her heart hurt. I thanked her and told her I would come by soon. As I walked back to my parents' front door, I could see them through the window, my father on the couch, my mother in the kitchen, my sister drying dishes. They looked like any ordinary family ending a long day. Inside, they would say they were doing their best. Inside, they would tell each other that I was dramatic, that I made mountains out of molehills, that I should trust them. Outside, a neighbor had video of a child alone on the sidewalk. I reached for the doorknob, then stopped. My hand hovered for a second. In my mind, I saw Lily's small hand gripping mine, heard her whisper that she did not want to be left there again. I saw my mother flipping her phone screen down. I saw the group chat messages calling me ungrateful and intense, and now I saw something else too. A possible line. A way to step out of their stories and into something more solid. Facts, records, footage, not anger, leverage. I finally opened the door and stepped back inside, carrying Mrs. Hadley's words with me like a weight in my pocket. My mother turned from the sink and asked if everything was all right outside. I told her that the weather was clear. She seemed satisfied with that. She said she hoped the evening had helped us move past everything. She said it would be nice if we could all act like a family again. I just nodded, because I knew something she did not know yet. The next time we all sat down together, it was not going to be for a quiet dinner. And when that time came, we would not be dealing in vague feelings and half-remembered stories. We would be dealing with dates, times, and the things cameras see when no one thinks they are being watched. A few days after that dinner, I stopped thinking of myself as someone who was just worried about Lily. I started thinking of myself as someone who needed proof. It began quietly. On Sunday afternoon, I walked over to Mrs. Hadley's house. I brought a small box of cookies from the grocery store as a thank you. She opened the door like she had been waiting. Her face looked careful and kind at the same time. She led me into her living room. The place smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner. There was a small table with framed photos of grandchildren and a big TV pressed against the wall. She said she had taken time to pull the clips from her door camera. She added that if I wanted to watch them alone, she would understand. I told her I preferred if she stayed, that I might need her to explain what I was seeing. She sat next to me on the couch and opened the camera app on her tablet. The first video showed a familiar image: my parents' front yard, the low fence between their place and hers, the sidewalk. In the center stood Lily. She wore a t-shirt with a cartoon animal on it and mismatched socks. She tapped on the front window with her small hand. There was no sound at first. Mrs. Hadley explained that this clip was from a few months ago, late afternoon. She tapped the screen and turned up the volume. Then I heard Lily's voice, a small echo in the outdoor microphone. She called out for Grandma, then for Grandpa. She tried the front doorknob, but it did not open all the way, like it had stuck. After a minute, she walked to the sidewalk and looked up and down the street. Cars passed. She stood still. Mrs. Hadley paused the video and said that she had gone out right after that to walk Lily back to the house. She said she had assumed someone inside had fallen asleep or could not hear. The second clip was harder to watch. It was from earlier in the summer. The timestamp showed almost dusk. Lily sat on the front steps hugging her knees. The porch light was not on. She rocked a little, like she was cold or nervous. At one point, she stood and tried the door again. It opened a crack. She called something inside. There was no answer. Mrs. Hadley said she had not gone outside that time because, from her kitchen, it had looked like someone might be right inside the door. She had been unsure. She said she had still saved the footage because it had not felt right. We watched more. None of it showed anything dramatic. No shouting or police or big scenes. It was just small moments of a child alone, calling into a quiet house. By the time we reached the last clip, my jaw hurt from how hard I was pressing it shut. Mrs. Hadley said that if I ever needed her to confirm what she had seen, she would do so. She said she did not want to make things harder in the neighborhood, but she could not pretend she had seen nothing. She said it was eating at her. I told her I appreciated her honesty. I meant it, more than she knew. On my way out, I asked if she could send the clips to me. She nodded and said she could email them or put them on a USB drive, whichever was easier. I chose the USB. Something about holding a physical object felt more real. Later that night, I sat at the small desk in the corner of my apartment that I half-jokingly called my office. It was just a cheap desk and a second-hand chair, but it gave me a place to think that was not the couch. I plugged in the USB drive and watched the clips again, this time alone. I started a folder on my computer and labeled it with a simple word: Lily. I added the phone screenshots. I saved the call log from that late-night call when her number had flashed on my screen from my parents' landline. I took screenshots of the family group chat, especially the parts where my parents described leaving her for just a few minutes and implied that she exaggerated. I compared those messages to the timestamps on the videos and on my call log. They did not match. They did not even come close. I did not feel satisfaction. I did not feel vindicated. I felt tired and strangely calm. Facts did not care about anyone's story. They just sat there, lined up in order. The next day, I took a few hours off from work. I told my manager I had some personal paperwork to handle. He did not ask questions. He knew I showed up, did my job, and rarely asked for anything. I drove to the social services office downtown. The building was plain, low, with gray walls and a line of people waiting near the entrance. Inside, the air smelled like paper and coffee. Kids' voices echoed down the hallway from somewhere unseen. There were posters about safety and parenting classes on the walls. At the front desk, I spoke to the woman working there. I did not file a formal report, not yet. Instead, I asked general questions. I said I was an uncle who sometimes watched his niece and wanted to understand what counted as neglect, what the supervision rules were, how often a child could be left alone. The woman, whose name tag said Carla, explained that a 6-year-old should not be left alone at home, especially not at night. She talked about guidelines and state recommendations. She spoke calmly, professionally. She said that if a child was repeatedly left alone, that could be a serious issue. I listened. I did not give names. I made notes in a small notebook I had brought with me. Carla said that if I ever felt a child was in danger, I should call immediately. She repeated that phrase, in danger. When I left the building, I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and watched people come and go. Parents held hands with their children, carrying folders of paperwork. Some looked relieved, others frustrated. It struck me that most of these people had never spent hours arguing about whether their feelings hurt their image. They were just trying not to drown. My parents, I realized, were more afraid of someone saying they were bad grandparents than they were of actually being bad grandparents. On Wednesday, I sat at my desk again and spread out everything I had. Call log, screenshots, notes from what Carla had told me, the small USB drive, dates Lily had stayed with them, dates she had stayed with me, dates Marissa had asked for help. I wrote them all down. My handwriting grew smaller as the page filled. It occurred to me then that this was not just about one night. It was about a pattern, about who stepped up and who only looked like they stepped up. Over the next week, my parents relaxed. I could feel it in the group chat. The messages about the incident faded. New topics took over. My mother sent pictures of a cake she had baked. My father shared a joke someone had sent him. There were memes, links, light banter. At one point, my mother wrote that she was glad we had all decided to move on from the misunderstanding. She added that it was best for Lily if adults did not hold on to grudges. The implication was clear. If I spoke up again, I would be the one holding on to something unhealthy. Marissa went along with it. She started texting me more practical things again. Could I pick up Lily on Friday? Could I drop her at rehearsal for a school assembly? Could I watch her for a few hours on Saturday while she ran errands? I said yes most of the time. It was easier to say yes than to imagine Lily stuck in a house where people forgot about her. One afternoon, I found myself at the grocery store with Lily in the cart, pointing at cereal boxes with bright cartoons on them. She asked if Grandma was mad at me. I asked why she thought that. She said she had heard Grandma telling someone that I was dramatic, a word she stumbled over but tried to repeat. Then Lily asked if being dramatic meant caring too much. I told her that caring about someone's safety was not a bad thing. I kept my voice even, not wanting to turn it into a speech. She seemed to accept that and went back to debating which cereal had the better toy. After I dropped her off, I sat in my car for a few minutes and stared at my hands. They were still stained from engine oil, small black lines under the nails that never fully washed out. These hands spent all day fixing things that were broken. I could not do the same kind of repair on my family, but I could at least put something in place so that the same damage did not keep happening. Later that week, my phone buzzed on the workbench. I wiped my hands and checked the screen. There was a new message in the group chat. My mother had sent it. She wrote that she and my father wanted to host a special celebration for Marissa's upcoming birthday. She said they had rented the event hall at the community center, the one near the park with the big windows. She said it would be a family-only event, plus a few close friends, and that attendance was important. She added that it had been a tough year, and that they all needed something joyful. People responded with heart emojis and comments about how nice it sounded. My aunt said she would bring her famous casserole. Someone else asked about the dress code. My father chimed in to say that he would arrange the music. Then my mother tagged me directly. She wrote that she hoped I would put aside any remaining tension and be there for my sister. She said Marissa needed her big brother to show support. She said it would mean a lot to the family. I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. In the past, this would have felt like pressure, a test of loyalty, a chance to either bend or be labeled the difficult one again. Now it felt like something else. It felt like a date. A clear point on the calendar where everyone would be in one place. My parents, Marissa, Lily, relatives, possibly neighbors. A room where stories could not be whispered behind closed doors. A room where facts could be dropped like tools on a workbench, one by one, in front of everyone. I typed a simple reply. I wrote that I would be there. Then I opened my phone's calendar app and scrolled to the date of the party. I tapped on it and added an event. I did not call it Marissa's birthday in my calendar. I gave it a different name, just one word that only I would see when the reminder popped up. Proof. When I pressed save, the small colored dot appeared on the date, a tiny mark on the screen that meant more than anyone knew. And as I slipped my phone back into my pocket and picked up my tools again, the noise of the garage faded for a moment. In my mind, I could already see the event hall, the tables, the cake, the smiling photos my mother would want. I could also see the folder I would carry in with me, the USB drive in my pocket, and the way some people in that room were going to look very different once they heard their own words repeated back to them, with dates and times attached. The weeks before Marissa's party felt strange. On the surface, nothing looked different. I still went to work, still changed oil and replaced brakes, still answered Lily's calls when she wanted to tell me about a drawing or a spelling test. The group chat filled up with messages about decorations and cake flavors and what time people should arrive. Underneath all of that, I felt something else building. Not anger, a kind of steady pressure, like the feeling in your ears when you drive up a mountain, quiet but constant. My calendar reminder for the party sat there on my phone, a small colored dot on the date with one word attached to it that only I saw when I opened it. Proof. Every time I checked the week, that word was there, small and calm. One afternoon at the garage, Javier noticed the way I was staring at my phone between jobs. He asked if everything was okay with my family situation. I told him there had been some issues with how my niece was being looked after and that I was trying to handle it the right way. He nodded and said that the right way usually meant slower but heavier when it finally landed. He said I looked more focused than he had ever seen me. He was right. I did feel focused. A few days after my visit to social services, I called a number I had been meaning to call for a long time. Anthony Rivas had been a friend of mine in high school. He had gone off to study law while I went into trade school. We had drifted in and out of contact over the years. I still had his number saved, though. I had watched him post about opening his own practice, about helping regular people sort out messes they did not create. When I reached him, he sounded surprised to hear from me, but not in a bad way. He asked how I had been. I did not waste time. I told him I needed advice about a child in my family, about supervision and safety, and what my options were if the people in charge refused to see a problem. He grew serious right away. He suggested that we meet in person. He said there was only so much he could say over the phone without seeing details. He gave me a time and told me his assistant would expect me. 2 days later, I sat in the waiting room of his office. The place was not fancy. Simple chairs, a small table with magazines, a water cooler. A framed photo of him with his family sat on a shelf near the receptionist's desk. He looked older than I remembered, but steadier too. When he called me back to his office, he asked me to start from the beginning. I did. I told him about the late-night call from Lily, about the dark house and the unlocked doors, about my parents coming home smelling like alcohol and annoyance. I told him about the family chat where they brushed everything off as an overreaction. I told him about the videos from Mrs. Hadley's camera. I told him about the school lunch incident and the conversation with the teacher in the parking lot. I did not add extra emotion. I stuck to dates and actions and words. He made notes as I talked. When I finished, he sat quietly for a moment, reading over what he had written. Then he said that what I had described did not look like a single mistake. He said it looked like a pattern. He said patterns mattered in situations like this. He asked me if I had everything saved. I told him about the USB drive and the notes and the screenshots. He asked if he could see some of it. I slid the small drive across his desk and handed over a printed copy of my timeline. He plugged the drive into his computer and watched one of the clips from Mrs. Hadley's camera. I watched his face. His jaw tightened slightly when he heard Lily calling for someone who never answered. When he stopped the clip, he said that children did not control what adults did, but adults had full control over where children were. He said that leaving a 6-year-old unsecured and alone could be taken very seriously by the right authorities. Then he looked at me and asked what I wanted. It was a simple question, but it sat in the air with weight. I thought about it carefully. I told him I did not want to destroy anyone. I did not want to end up in some long, ugly war. I said I wanted Lily safe. I said I wanted clear boundaries on who could be alone with her and under what conditions. I said I wanted my parents to lose the ability to pretend this never happened. He nodded slowly. He said that if my goal was safety and clear boundaries, there were structured ways to do that. He said it did not have to be about revenge. It could be about protection and evidence. He mentioned options, not in detail, just broad strokes. He spoke about formal arrangements, about how guardianship and visitation could be addressed, about how written statements and documented incidents could shift who had authority to make decisions. He said that involving social services properly, with documentation, changed how seriously people paid attention. He said that timing might matter too. I told him about the upcoming birthday party at the community center, about how the whole family would be there. He leaned back in his chair for a moment. Then he said that sometimes people needed to be confronted with their reflection in a room full of witnesses. He said that if something was going to be set down in stone, doing it when everyone was present had a certain power. We did not build the entire plan in that one meeting. This was not a movie. He told me he would need to review the materials in detail. He said he would look up the specific rules for our area. He said his assistant would send me a list of things to gather, like any school notes, any text messages where my parents described their caretaking, any statements from people like Mrs. Hadley. Before I left, he said one more thing. He said that whatever happened, I had to stay calm. He said that in rooms where decisions were made, the calm person with organized records usually carried more weight than the loud person with excuses. I told him that staying calm was not going to be a problem. Over the next week, my evenings were quiet but busy. I sat at my desk, printing out copies of messages, highlighting dates and times, putting them into plastic sleeves. I made a copy of the written note Mrs. Hadley had given me, in which she described what she had seen and that she was willing to confirm it if asked. I requested a simple record from Lily's school of the missed lunch days and the notes sent home. They printed them for me without drama. To them it was routine paperwork. To me it was part of a larger picture. I did not tell Marissa or my parents about any of this. On the surface, I acted like life was going on as usual. I picked Lily up when I was asked. I dropped her off. I responded politely in the group chat when my mother posted about party themes and playlists. In the chat, there was a lot of excitement. My mother described the color scheme she had chosen for the hall. She said there would be a photo wall where people could take pictures. She said she was having a special sign made that said, "Family First." She liked that phrase. She had used it on me many times when she wanted me to agree with her. At one point, my father sent a message that made me pause. He wrote that this party would be a good chance for everyone to show that they could let small things go and be united. He followed it with a comment that there would be no room for negativity. My aunt responded with applause emojis and said she was proud of him for being a strong head of the family. I read that and filed it away next to everything else. In my mind, I could already see the moment when his idea of being the head of the family would run into something he did not control. 2 days before the party, I had another short meeting at Anthony's office. This time, his assistant was there too, carrying a folder. They had organized my information in a way that made it even clearer. I did not ask to read every page, that would come later. For now, it was enough to know that there was structure, that the things I had seen and written down were no longer just my word against theirs. Anthony told me that certain steps had been taken or were in motion. He said some contacts had been made. He said that, by the time of the party, there would be things that could not be easily undone or ignored. He did not go into detail in that moment, and I did not press him. We were both saving specifics for when they would have the most impact. Before I left, he placed a slim envelope on the table and rested his hand on it. He said that this envelope contained something important that would be relevant at the right moment. He said I did not need to open it before the party unless something unexpected happened. He suggested that I keep it with me that day, along with my own folder. I took the envelope and felt its light weight. Not dramatic, not thick, but it felt heavier than it looked. On the morning of the party, I woke up before my alarm. I lay there for a moment in the half-light and thought about all the times I had walked into family events just hoping nothing would explode. This time, I was not hoping for that. I showered, shaved, and put on a clean shirt and jacket. I was not trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to look like what I was trying to be. Steady. On the table by the door, my folder waited. The USB drive was inside, along with my notes and the copies I had made. The envelope from Anthony sat on top for a second. Then I slipped it inside as well. My phone buzzed with a message from Marissa. She wrote that she was excited and reminded everyone of the start time. She added a line directed at me, saying she hoped today would be peaceful and about her, not old arguments. I stared at that line for a moment, then I replied that I would see her there and that I hoped it would be an important day. On my way out, I stopped by the mirror and looked at myself. For years, my family had called me the quiet one, the serious one, the one who made things heavy. Looking at my reflection, I did not see someone heavy. I saw someone who had finally decided to stop letting other people's stories be the only ones that counted. The drive to the community center was short. The parking lot was already half full when I arrived. Balloons in pastel colors floated near the entrance, tied to posts. Through the glass doors, I could see the glow of string lights and hear the muffled sound of music and laughter. I took a deep breath, picked up my folder from the passenger seat, and stepped out of the car. Inside the lobby, a small sign pointed toward the event hall with Marissa's name written in big letters. A paper banner with "Happy Birthday" hung over the doorway. I walked in. The room was bright. Round tables were covered with white tablecloths and pink runners. There was a long table near the back with food, another with a cake covered in flowers. A photo wall stood near one corner. A big cursive sign above it read, "Family First," just like my mother had promised. I saw all of them. My mother, near the food table, giving instructions to a cousin about platters. My father, talking loudly with an uncle near the speakers. Marissa, in a new dress, laughing as a group of relatives surrounded her. Lily, in a small dress with shiny shoes, standing near the photo wall, holding a paper cup and looking around the room as if trying to keep track of everyone at once. Some cousins noticed me first. Their eyes flicked to the folder in my hand, then to my face. Their expressions tightened for a second, like they were wondering which version of me had arrived. My mother turned, saw me, and forced a bright smile. She walked over, hugged me quickly, and told me she was glad I could make it. Her tone carried the unspoken part, that she expected everything to go smoothly. I moved further into the room. I set my folder down carefully on an empty chair near a table in the middle. I did not sit yet. I just stood for a moment and took it all in. Around the edges of the room, people had their phones out. Some were already taking photos of the decorations. Someone near the entrance pointed their camera briefly in my direction, then toward the cake. It occurred to me then that phones would be everywhere today, capturing pieces of whatever happened, just like Mrs. Hadley's camera had done outside my parents' house. The music lowered a little as my father walked toward the microphone set up near the front of the room. He tapped it lightly, checking the sound. Conversations started to quiet. People turned their chairs slightly to face him. I reached down and rested my hand on the folder, feeling the edges of the papers inside. And as my father cleared his throat to begin his welcome speech, I saw another small light blink to life across the room. A phone held up by someone near the photo wall, already recording. My father tapped the microphone twice. The music dropped to a low murmur. People turned their chairs. Phones came up, ready to record the family speech. He started talking about how proud he was of Marissa, how she had grown into a strong woman and mother, how family first had always been his guiding rule. He mentioned recent little misunderstandings and said families should not let small things pull them apart. I watched Lily. She stood near the photo wall, fingers twisting her paper cup, eyes jumping between faces. My hand stayed on the folder. When my father raised his glass and said we were all here to show unity, I stepped forward. I did not take the microphone from him. I waited until he lowered it. Then I asked calmly if I could say a few words as Marissa's brother and as Lily's uncle. The room shifted. People glanced at each other. My mother's smile froze. Marissa looked unsure. My father hesitated, then held the microphone out to me. Maybe he thought I was going to apologize. Maybe he trusted the crowd to keep me in line. I took the mic and thanked everyone for coming. I congratulated Marissa. I said I loved my niece very much. Then I said that family first only meant something if the smallest person in the family was treated like she mattered. The room went quiet. I said there had been nights when Lily was left alone in a dark house. I said there had been days when she stood outside, calling for someone who did not answer. I said there had been missed lunches and unlocked doors and long absences that were later called a few minutes. My mother shook her head. She said this was not the time. She said I was embarrassing them. My father tried to laugh it off and said I was being dramatic again. I opened my folder. I said that on one particular night, at 10:37 p.m., Lily had called me from their landline. I held up a printed copy of my call log with the date and time. I said I arrived 11 minutes later to a dark house and no car in the driveway. I said that while I was there, and my mother's phone had lit up with a message saying they had been gone much longer than planned. I did not read the whole thing. I did not need to. The people who had been in that chat had seen it. A cousin put her phone halfway down. Then I walked to the small projector the hall staff had set up for the planned slideshow. I plugged in the USB drive Mrs. Hadley had given me. I had cleared it with the staff ahead of time, told them I might need the projector for a short video. The first clip appeared on the wall, no sound at first. Just Lily on the sidewalk in front of my parents' house, tapping on the window. The timestamp glowed in the corner. Someone in the crowd gasped. I turned on the audio. Lily's small voice echoed through the speakers, calling for Grandma, then Grandpa. The silence between her calls was louder than any shout. My mother shouted that this was private. She said I had no right. She said neighbors were nosy. My father barked that cameras did not show everything, that we were making a show out of nothing. I said the cameras showed enough. I clicked to the next image, a copy of a note from Lily's school about missed lunches. Another date, another time someone forgot and blamed her for being needy. I did not scream, I did not add accusations. I just laid the pages down on a nearby table, one by one, in front of everyone. Then the door at the back of the hall opened. Anthony walked in wearing a simple suit, carrying his own slim folder. He stopped near the edge of the crowd and waited for my signal. When I met his eyes, he stepped forward. I introduced him as my lawyer and an old friend. The word lawyer made several people sit straighter. Phones came all the way up now, not halfway. My mother started to say I was taking things too far. My father told Anthony this was a private family matter. Anthony replied, in a calm voice, that children's safety was never just private. He said that earlier that week, certain filings had been made with family court and with child services. He held up an envelope and said these were the official copies for the grandparents and for Marissa. He explained, in simple terms, that effective immediately, my parents were not allowed to have Lily unsupervised. That any babysitting had to be supervised by Marissa or by another approved adult named in the paperwork. That a caseworker would be following up. That any violation would be documented and could lead to more serious action. My mother went pale. My father tried to argue, but he saw the phones. He saw the video still on the wall behind us, frozen on an image of Lily alone on the steps. Marissa took the envelope with shaking hands. She scanned the first page, eyes widening as she hit the words about supervised contact and documented neglect. Her gaze moved from the paper to the video, then to Lily, then to me. No one spoke for a long moment. Lily walked over to me and took my hand. I looked at my parents. I told them quietly that this was not about punishing them. It was about making sure the smallest person in this room never had to call for help from an empty house again. The hall was silent, except for the soft hum of the projector. Anthony placed the other envelope on the table in front of my father. My father stared at it like it was something poisonous. I picked up my folder, gave Marissa a small nod, and turned toward the door with Lily's hand in mine. Behind us, chairs scraped, cameras watched, and the big sign over the photo wall, Family First, hung crooked in the suddenly quiet room.